I'm Jaemin Frazer. I'm the founder of the Insecurity Project. I work with leaders, entrepreneurs and business owners to help them solve the insecurity problem in their life so they can show up at their best where it matters most. After desperately wanting to join the army, I failed my entrance due to drugs. On a 3-day coaching retreat, I had my whole Christianity deconstructed unexpectedly. I moved my family to Germany to try and work out how to do business online. Came back with no money, worked as a bricklayer to substitute income. Now I am the author of 4 books, had a radio segment playing around the country, did a TEDx talk, revenue cracked 250K off only 24 hours work a week. The journey's been incredibly hard but worth it.
Pumped we're talking.
It's great. Yeah, thanks very much, Glenn. I've been looking forward to this opportunity for ages.
No, man, I've been looking forward to unpicking your story, and it's a freaking cool story. I remember when we first met, I'm like, what was your background? And you're like, well, I used to be a pastor for the Christian church. I was like, what? Like I hadn't really in my world come across that. And then you're like, yeah, and I got out, and like you kind of kept going through it. And man, I don't know if that's the best place to start something like this, but I just think it's interesting. It's a really interesting part of your journey. And I'd love you to maybe just share a little bit about like your backstory in terms of what led you to that point, being a pastor, you know, sharing the word. I sometimes think about, you know, being like this concept of being a key person of influence, being an evangelist for a message, for an idea, for a set of philosophies. And part of what I resonated with you was kind of like, that's what you were doing, but yeah, for a religion. And then you were kind of like, well, hang on, I want to apply the same skills somewhere else. So mate, walk us into that part of the journey.
So I think it starts with the family that I grew up in. You know, my parents modeled a very practical faith, a very vibrant faith. It was something that wasn't just something they did once a week. It affected every part of their life. And so I grew up, I was their firstborn, and I grew up in a way that really worked for me. I enjoyed that experience. I enjoyed the church that we were a part of. I felt like it was a really safe place to find myself in. It presented a beautiful story to make sense of life, and it gave me a framework to think about generosity and kindness and relationships. I looked at it as a great model for marriage and family. So as a young man, I always thought I'd get married young, I'd have a family, because I'd seen that modeled well. So I really enjoyed my experience growing up in the church. It just made sense to me. And it was a process of me kind of exploring that spirituality in a way that was very authentic for me too, as I grew up. Culminating, like I mentioned in the intro, that I was desperate to join the army and failed a drugs test on my final exam to get in, which was extraordinary because straight 180, never done drugs, never been drunk, never really been to a party, except my mate was having an 18th when we finished school, and I arrived half an hour late, starving, and said to my mate, what do you got to eat? He says, I've got just the thing for you, Fraze.
Oh, he gave you a cookie.
Yeah, he gave me a plate of them. And so I'm going into these things just high on life because it's a great time. You know, I finished school and everything's outstanding and having an excellent time. So didn't even really notice. Anyway, a week later when my test was done, the officer sat me down. So, son, when was the last time you experimented with marijuana? I'm like, Mum, never. Well, look, the tests say otherwise. So that's an instant disqualification. So
you didn't even know.
No,
when you were at the party.
No, I didn't know.
How many did you have? Because normally those things will flatten.
I know. Maybe 2 or 3. So I don't know what happened there, but I really was naive to the whole situation and didn't put 2 or 2 together until then. Interestingly, I bumped into my mate. I didn't see him after that. Like we all parted ways. I didn't see him for 10 years. And then he got word that that's what had happened. And then I bumped into him in the hallway at the local workers club in Goulburn one night, and he nearly cried. He just said, Fraze, I ruined your life. I shouldn't have done that to you. I've been thinking about that every day since.
No, hang on. So you hadn't, so he wasn't aware of that. You weren't aware of that. It wasn't until 10 years later that you connected. Had you connected the dots? That it was.
I connected the dots, sure, and word had got back to him that that's what had happened, so he was aware, but we hadn't spoken.
Okay,
And when we did speak, he was like, "Oh no, here it is. I've ruined my friend's life." And he was so sorry. And I said, "Dude, like you actually saved my life. I don't know what I was thinking with the army. It was a strange choice. I don't know how that was in my head. But wow, what a godsend, what a fork in the road."
Yeah, right. And I'm curious to use the word godsend as to whether like literally or not literally, right? Only because I mean something, and we'll get to it, right? And look, we're not going to make the whole conversation about this, but I just find it interesting. So something eventually caused you to leave the church and the faith, effectively. Do you reckon that ADFA Defence Force was an early rebellion against something that you maybe weren't quite conscious of, or something, or was it non-connected? Because it does seem like a opposing, maybe not opposing, but very tangential direction.
I don't think so. I felt like it was some structure. It was an easy path into engineering. I was going to do engineering at ADFA. I don't think it was about rebellion. That didn't seem like there was anything in me that was interested in rebellion at that stage.
Yeah. I seriously considered ADFA as well. My dad was in the Navy. I seriously considered it because it was a well-planned pathway, and got to play with big toys and all that sort of stuff. But just decided that my dad also pointed out that the Navy that he knew is not the Navy that is now.
Sure.
It's a very, very different world now than it was 40, 50 years ago. Dad joined when he was 15. So it was a very different Navy, I think, back then. And he reckons it was just a wild time back then, like great fun, like really good fun. Right. And whereas now I think he feels like it's become a bit of a bureaucracy, but I mean, I'm not in there, so I can't say, but cookies, funny.
Cookies.
Saved by the cookie.
So that was a fork in the road. Straight after that, I went to a youth camp and felt like I had a deeply spiritual experience of that camp, that I kind of had an idea about my future and could see clearly all I wanted to do was then go into the ministry and become a church leader. And so instead of going to ADFA, I went and did Bible college for 4 years and trained in the ministry. And I can still remember the day at 23 when the senior pastor of the church I grew up in retired/resigned, and the oversight of our denomination thought that I would be a suitable replacement. And I just thought, I think that was the path I was walking on, but not at 23. There's no way anyone's going to think this is a good idea. And I was horrified when they were going to announce it at the church. Everyone, I imagine, would just pack up and go, how could a 23-year-old have anything to say? But interestingly, everyone stuck around, thought it was a good idea, and trusted me to lead that organization, which was amazing.
That is pretty mad. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I mean, in movies and stuff, you see the pastor as like the guy that is like talking to families when they lose a child or when something tragic happens. And it's kind of like it's always this person with a life of experience, that's sort of sharing that. Is that part of the role? Because I agree with you. At 23 years old, you kind of be thinking like, hang on a minute, like how do I could potentially read some sermons from the Bible and bring some pizzazz to that, but
yeah, no, you're right. It's very rare. It's like no one wants to hear from a 23-year-old life coach either, because you're like, what could they possibly have to say about anything? Yeah. So it was definitely strange. But for whatever reason, the congregation were willing to allow me to grow into that role and trust me with that leadership. So it was very humbling. And I was.
This is all in Goulburn, yeah.
It was in Goulburn, yeah. Yeah. And we also had a Christian school and a daycare center. And so it was kind of a baptism of fire into business as well, because the manager of the business side of things went on long service leave just after I got the role. And so then I had oversight of everything while he was away. And off the back of no business knowledge, had a look at the books for the first time and could see we were trading insolvently. And so I had no idea about business, but could tell the difference between black and red. Yeah. And so when he came home,
what happened to God providing?
Absolutely. That's kind of.
I suppose he provided the P&L.
Well, but that was kind of the problem. I think there was this bunch of passion and faith, but no practical responsibility for the real world. And so this guy came home, jet lagged, came into the office to pick up something he forgot and asked me how things were while he was away. And I said, well, it was pretty interesting. He says, what do you mean by that? I said, well, I've had a look at the books and we're trading insolvently and you have no job here anymore. And he's a guy who's been working in the organization for 10 years or so. Here I am, Johnny come lately. And I've just told him that he's fired. And I can still remember that moment because he sat me down. He got a piece of paper and a pen out and he drew himself. Here's me, I'm 50, and here's you, and you're 23. And there was just lines going between, but it was just highlighting the fact that who are you again and how are you making this decision to cause me to leave here? And I just went, I don't know how I'm doing this, but I am. This is wrong. You can't have been doing this to this organization. So
that's legit. That's legit. That's tough. Most people don't learn that lesson for a long time. Most business owners listening to this have not learnt that lesson yet in terms of being able to have hard conversations with people that aren't doing their job.
Yeah, so I think for whatever reason, I've always been very pragmatic, but I've always been very wholehearted. And so I have been unable to walk a road that is not honest or has integrity. And so I just couldn't play the game that he was playing. And so I was unwilling to do that. So it was a pretty intense position because not only was I leading a congregation at 23, I was kind of running an insolvent business as well. And so I had to pay back unpaid super and tax and had to sell property and had to clean up a bunch of mess. And so I learned a lot in that time.
Oh man, that's awesome.
and a bunch of skills I developed, like, public speaking. I can remember after the first 3 sermons I preached, I thought, that's pretty much all I know. This is going to be an interesting life now because I don't know what else to say. And so just the sense of having to think and wait and explore and learn and bring something relevant and meaningful rather than just adding to the noise, learning how to do that regularly, give leadership and provide certainty for people going through transition and change. So I cut my teeth in a very real way in a difficult situation, and that served me well. So that was 10 years of my life, but interestingly, at year 8, I had a Mal Meninga moment. I don't know if you remember Mal Meninga's first day in politics.
I don't.
So, do you know who Mal Meninga is?
Yeah, maybe walk everyone through it from that might be international.
Sure. So the former Australian rugby league captain of the Queensland team, captain of the Canberra Raiders. He always had this broken arm, or perhaps he never had a broken arm. He's always wearing a cast while playing football and just bludgeoning people out of the way with his cast on his arm. I don't know how he got away with it. Anyway, so someone talked Mal Meninga into going into politics. In his first press conference, he's sitting there, microphones up, press gallery there, asking him questions, and he lasted maybe 30 seconds. And then he just stands up, takes his lapel mic off and says, I can't do this. Just
did he really? I didn't know that.
Just,
that's awesome.
It was astounding. And so I had this kind of epiphany around the church that I was running. I was so horrified at the mess I don't know if evil's is too strong a word, but the way the institution was so different from what I read about the message of Jesus. It just seemed like the institution had a life of its own that didn't relate to anything that I read about the early church or the message of Jesus or what he represented. And so I thought I could just leave, or I could fight something. I could actually demand something change. And so long and the short, I shut the church for 3 months and kicked everyone out, and suggested people work out whether they wanted to be a Christian, not because they could go to a church once a week, or not because they could have a sermon preached to them, or tick a box, but because they genuinely resonated with that message and wanted to wholeheartedly follow. And so most people thought I was the Antichrist, and thought that was a terrible thing to do, and just left and went to a different church. But after 3 months, about 30 people came back. And that began two of the most extraordinary years in my experience with that church, because it was a bunch of people willing to experiment with something authentic without a bunch of rules that we had to do. We didn't have to do anything. We just wanted to do something real and authentic. So that was a beautiful experience. A bit the hand it fed me in many ways, because 30 people couldn't sustain my wage. So I had to go and explore.
How many was there? What was your drop off?
It was 120.
Okay.
Down
So
to 30.
you decimated the hey, here's a little experiment. Okay. We got the core group that no one else wanted.
Yeah. And there are still some people that would cross the other side of the street. Like, this is 12 years later, 15 years later, maybe even, that still have never come to terms with that moment in time. But anyway, so I did that. Again, it was a wholehearted thing. I felt like that was the right thing to do. And, but yeah, it was a nice experience. So I bit the hand that fed me, had to go find alternate work, got a job as a school chaplain at the local high school, which was a very interesting experience because, they'd never had a school chaplain before. It was the first time John Howard made funding available for chaplains. So it was a bit of an unknown quantity. No one really knew what a chaplain was or what their boundary was, whether they were a secular position, whether it was a religious position. No one knew. But the school principal day one said, Jaemin, here's the thing. You're not a teacher. You're not a parent. You're a chaplain. Just go and be a chaplain. Just go and be there for 800 kids. That's your job description. I thought, oh boy, when I was at school, it wasn't that easy to make friends with 800 kids. I'm going to get beaten up and someone's going to steal my lunch money. So it was a big lesson in backing myself, one big exercise in backing myself, actually. And then 2 years into that was when a spiritual retreat, who I invited one of my mentors to come and run a spiritual retreat for our church, and he introduced some coaching content to that. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is a missing technology. I'm sure that this belongs. I'm sure that people are supposed to take responsibility, do awareness, ask decent questions.
This is what Jesus taught.
Pretty much, yeah. But
like
this,
it's like, no, like he said, know thyself, and yet somehow all the stuff that he shared on how to know thyself didn't kind of get bundled into it.
Didn't, no. And this idea that to be a Christian was to have childlike faith, which was kind of outsourcing all the change work to God. I'll just believe, I'll just trust, and God will magically, mysteriously improve my marriage, restore my finances, make my kids succeed. I do something. No, that's terrible. That would be secular. So it was a strange concept. And so when the coaching skill set was presented to me, I just instantly resonated. Where has this been my whole life? Why don't I understand this? And instantly from that moment, went and Googled training to become a life coach, and had signed up to do a diploma in coaching the next day. On the first, the first intensive was only 2 weeks later. Day 2 of that first 3-day intensive, I called my wife and said, I'm quitting my job as a chaplain. I'm going to start a coaching business. And she cried, and not happy tears, the other kind of tears, because it was our only source of income. And I was just going, I'm going to go out into the big world and start a coaching business.
It's like, hey, Jaemin, remember the last time you made a bold move and you decimated the congregation?
Yeah. But the coach training environment is so hyped and pepped up. Everyone's going to make $1 million and change the world. That's part of their sales pitch. Turns out it's a lot harder than that. But I gave myself 4 weeks to make it work, and miraculously on the last day, went into an employment agency with a bright idea that perhaps I could do some coaching for their long-term unemployed, that organizations the employment agencies would make the most money by moving their most stuck clients. So I thought, I reckon I can help their most stuck. I reckon they're the people I could help the most. So we could work together here. So it was a really incredible partnership opportunity that was off a whim. And it turned out that the coaching tools were very practical for people who'd been written off and felt like they had no hope. And so I watched a bunch of people pick themselves up out of a very dark place and go get work, to the great surprise of the employment agency who'd been trying to fight them and force them for years. And then I was kind of on my way. I got to replicate that, train a bunch of other coaches to deliver that program. And at the height of the operation, I had 30 coaches working for me, delivering this program I developed around the country. It all went tits up, but it was a wild ride for a couple of years while it lasted.
I want to get to some of the transformation stuff, of course, around you know, really developing your career and your reputation as one of the leaders in your industry. But I feel like, I mean, for me, I remember a really interesting conversation with you when you were talking about, so you've kind of gone through and like, you know what, all right, I'm not going to be a pastor, I'm not going to be a chaplain, I'm going to be a coach, but you're still in the church. And then walk us through the exit from Christianity, because I think it's just, what is it? Coaching, I find, is a mechanism for allowing one to reflect on oneself and make difficult decisions that we would otherwise want to ignore, or potentially to even identify information inside our psyche or consciousness or understanding that we're ignoring, right? And you've got just a track record, even before becoming a coach, of making bold decisions and trusting your intuition and awareness and acting upon it, which I think is very rare. And in the current climate, with the amount of noise and the group or the echo chambers that are being created inside like social media and all this sort of stuff that's going on, where people are finding themselves stuck in ideologies or not even know they're stuck in an ideology, and yet you decided, not because necessarily the ideology is good or bad, I have no real opinion one way or the other on that, but I'm just curious when I come across someone that chooses to be so deep in something like that and then totally exit.
I didn't see it coming, that's for sure. I have talked to plenty of people who've had very bad experiences in the church. I certainly didn't have a bad experience. I had a wonderful experience. It was a story that made sense to me. I found myself in that story and was all in. It was very authentic. However, trusting my intuition and going down the coaching road, as you're right, it's all about asking great questions and examining reality, examining the story we find ourselves in. And so without knowing, it was deconstructing my worldview one step at a time. And then my business partner had interviewed Dr. Ian Snape, who is an NLP expert and one of the leading coaches in the country. And I just thought, this guy is so sharp. I've got to find a way to be mentored by this guy. He seems like he's got what I want. He was good enough to take me on a one-on-one 3-day experience on the east coast of Tasmania, snorkeling for abalone, rock climbing, abseiling. And while it was an open frame, anything I wanted to talk about. And it still rates as the mountaintop experience of my life, because he very skillfully laid my life bare. And I was obviously ready for that. I was obviously willing. He couldn't have done it without my volition. But it was this one good question leads to two, and two good questions lead to five. And next thing you know, everything's up for grabs. And the more questions that I asked, the less sense that story, the Christian story, made to me. The more problems, the more holes I found in it, and it terrified me, because that's how I'd found myself. That's what it's where I went to for sense about everything. So it was very, very difficult, but at the same time, extraordinarily wonderful. Just the sense of internal resonance and joy and gratitude and bigness, that I was moving into a bigger space, a more life-giving space. And that
can we zoom into that a little bit more? Because you kind of like, can you go into a bit of that conversation? Because I think anyone listening in here is going like, what is a good question that gets you to, like, what is a question that gets to the very foundation of your belief system? Like,
Yeah, well, I suppose it was just the epistemology. How do we know what we know? So one of the interesting questions was, okay, Jaemin, so you got born as a Frazer with your parents, Graham and Carolyn. They were devout Christians. You didn't choose that. What if you were born in Pakistan and your parents were devout Muslims. Your father was the imam. Like, what then? Perhaps you would have enjoyed that experience just as much. Perhaps you would have been as wholehearted about that experience as you were about this experience. You've seen a very tiny map of reality. There are other maps of reality that are the same, expressing, trying to understand the same bit of reality. Why is your map better than their map? How do you know your map's true? So just very troubling questions like that.
Yeah, right. But I mean, but that's a really good thought experiment that does get to that foundational piece. It's like, well, how do you know what you know?
How do you know what you know? That's exactly right.
And this becomes a conversation of free will, right? Like do you have free will? I like this experiment, right? Which is if I give you a red pill or a blue pill, right? Well, which one would you choose?
That's a real question.
Yeah.
The red one.
Okay, the red pill, right? Now, the question is this: do you have free will? Did you choose that out of free will?
I think so.
Well, this gets weird, right? This melted my brain. So now let me ask you, why did you choose the red pill?
I have no idea.
Well, what if you did? Just imagine, like the brain fired off. When you think of red, what do you think of?
It's more extreme, maybe more dangerous. There's more challenge and risk, but therefore more reward down the red. Blue's probably a bit more innocuous, a bit safer, a bit more boring.
Okay. And so you've built up those associations over years and years and years. So really in that moment, there wasn't free will. There was you just running a pattern of associations over decades as to what you associate to red or blue.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that wasn't free will. That was you running a program in your head around what red represents. And when a friend of mine did the same thing to me, I was like, and it becomes I think that question that he asked you is very important in the sense of, well, why have you chosen that pathway? Like really why? Right? I get you're in it, but why? Where was your choice? Where was your agency in the process? So what else happened on that kind of walk? Because obviously you started to free up some thinking.
It did. And then just examining some of the holes in my thinking that I'd never been courageous to pursue. So just some of the fairy tale narratives around the Christian story, Noah's Ark, Moses and parting the Red Sea, all the narratives, and just examining the fact that other maps had similar stories just with different characters, and saying, maybe they're metaphors, maybe they're used to help understand an idea rather than are they a historically checked fact document. And then examining also whether I needed those stories to be making my decisions. Down the track a little, when I told my parents that I'd no longer called myself a Christian, it probably would have been easier to say that I was gay and I was, it was a very traumatic experience for my parents. And the first thing my dad said
parents
to me
before
was,
wife?
No, wife first, and she was going to leave me. Like,
so hang on. So you've come back from abalone diving, abseiling, and deconstructing like Christianity for yourself. You get on the plane and you fly home. You get off the plane. Like, start from there.
Yeah. And I'm on cloud nine. It was still such an extraordinary experience, because not only was that deconstructed, but I got taken into this extraordinary peak state experience of finding flow, of finding all this internal resourcefulness, of discovering answers within myself rather than needing to find them in a mythology or a religion. And so I was in this peak state. I got off the plane. I came home still just my feet barely touching the ground. And Catherine asked the wrong question. She was like, how? She probably couldn't even ask the right question. Like, what was she going to say and what was I going to say? One thing led to the other. And so I kind of said, well, yeah, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore. And she was very calm about it, but just said, okay, so we'll sell the house. The kids will probably go to your parents for a bit until we can find our feet, and I'll take this house. And like, it was just clearly that is the end of all that we know. Who are you again? And she'd married me. Like I was this fired up youth pastor when she first met me, so clear, so passionate, had the whole world mapped out in my mind. She'd come from a more traditional background, a bit more nominal in her faith, and just was inspired by my passion. And it was everything about my whole world. And so for me then to say, I'm not that guy anymore, well, her question was, so then who are you? And I'm afraid. But it was such an amazing experience because it didn't even touch me. I'm just like, oh, okay, that's interesting. By the way, good luck finding someone who can love you like I can, because in fact, all the things you've loved about me are now just better. They're just enhanced. So you're not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. You're going to be okay. And it was just, it was.
How did she respond to that? Did that land?
It did. It did, because my certainty, it gave her permission to be certain as well after the period of chaos. And I mean, that's been my pattern. I constantly put her in chaos, as you've already heard. I make decisions very quickly. I'm willing to jettison things the moment they stop working, and that does create chaos for people who take longer to change. And
people don't often realize how much of a creative force destruction is. You know, it's part of the yin yang dynamic, and people want to be creative without destruction and find themselves very constrained by old paradigms, old infrastructure. Is you're pretty good at just going chink.
Well, yeah, and I probably
move on.
There were probably a number of steps I'd taken in my mind to allow me to make that transition ultimately, and I probably hadn't shared any of those with her.
Yeah,
so in her mind, it was
a progression for you, but quite abrupt for her.
Hadn't taken her on the journey, and that was one thing she said. Could you please help me understand how you got here? And so the conversations over the next 3 weeks were very useful for her to go, okay, well, I can see how that makes sense, and I trust that.
Did it rattle her? It obviously rattled her faith in you. Did it rattle her faith in faith, or in faith?
It did. But early on, she said, well, I don't feel the need to ask these same questions at the moment. So happy for you to ask that, and we'll see how this plays out. And she wore a lot of the pain from the family and friends and existing networks around that. As you do for the people you love. Like I was kind of insulated against that because I thought I was right, but she's watching people say things about me that were very hurtful and very unkind, and kind of wearing that. So that added to her pain in that season.
It's also, I had the alpha guy that was like the shining light of, taking my old paradigm of my faith to this new level in the future, and it's great, and everyone respects him, and he's the guy, and now he's like the Antichrist. It's like, nuts.
Yeah, that was it for sure. Because in my family, had a huge extended Christian family. So I was the pin-up boy, like as pastor. You've arrived. So then to not be pastor, no one's got a narrative for how that's a good step. That's a step backward into rebellion or greed or ego, or like now I'm fallen. So everyone's praying for me. Everyone's worried about me. Everyone's just, that's the thing my dad said to me when I said, he says, oh, well, I suppose you're going to have an affair now. Just like, hang on, Dad. My Christianity is not the thing making me not have an affair on someone else, not cheat on my wife. I'm able to make those decisions for myself. I'm able to go, I don't want to do that, not because someone else is telling me that. I'm able to take responsibility for my own morality. So no, I don't think I'm going to have an affair. Actually, I think I'm less likely to have an affair now. And that always amused me, because how many times do you see Christian leaders exposed for living these hidden lives, very immoral lives? I saw another one just the other day, Ravi Zacharias, who'd been esteemed as one of the all-time saints. And yet after his death, he finds out he's running these series of massage parlors. He's got these workers that he's feeding and paying and getting sex on the side, and all kinds of horrible things that, but yeah. So anyway, all that to say, it was a really important thing to go. Jesus said, "You'll know a tree by its fruit." So, Dad, if you see me behaving in a way that's bad, happy to challenge. You can challenge me about anything you see. But if you look at my life and you see good fruit, there's probably not a lot to say. There's probably nothing to say, actually.
How did he respond to that? That's pretty.
Yeah, he responded okay to that.
It's hard to argue with that.
It is hard to argue with that, for sure. So, and I think that's the thing with change. People who are early adopters, the big danger they present is they threaten other people's sense-making paradigms. They force them to ask questions they're not ready to ask of their own journey. Yeah. So I think that's
any cult or culture, like a culture is just a cult with more members, right? Any of them will have an autoimmune response to anyone within that starts or that switches their ideology to anything else, like, because it's that instant. Don't make us confront the very sound, logical, rational reasons in which you're abandoning the principles that this culture relies upon. So wild ride so far, and so now you kind of step across this threshold. You're no longer pastor, you're no longer chaplain, you're no longer in this faith. But correct me if I'm wrong, in parallel you've been coaching?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, okay. I've been coaching at the same time. Yeah,
right. So now, correct me if I'm wrong, or help me understand, but now coaching becomes like the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It became the thing. And I was still pastoring for maybe a year after I started my coaching business. I wasn't a chaplain, but I was still the pastor. Started the coaching business, went really gangbusters for 12 months when I cracked the partnership opportunity with the employment agencies, trained other coaches, realized I was in over my head because the front end was looking very good, but the back end was a mess. And it turned out that I didn't understand the fact that what I brought to the table was hard to train and hard to replicate. So I could teach coaches a model, but it was much harder to have them embody that model. So why I was getting great results was because I was all in around this. I was smoking what I was selling, and I was living out of the overflow of these experiences, whereas other coaches weren't quite there yet, and so weren't replicating that. So it was difficult to guarantee results as I scaled. Then I went into partnership with another coach who was a lot older than me and was much better at business than me. And I kind of deferred to his wisdom a lot in the structure of the organization. And then we went really top heavy, had a team of 5 people, went into a fair bit of debt to manage all that. And I just kind of trusted that was the right thing. I have no excuse for trusting that, but I just went along. Then I subbed out for 12 months, went on a 12-month sabbatical because I was a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing, and kind of my life was out of balance. So didn't take an income, just checked out for 12 months and went and did nothing, which was an interesting experiment because I kind of did sabbatical like I did work. It was like an all in. And 3 months into doing nothing in an all-in way turned out to be just as stressful, if not more stressful, than doing everything all in.
How do you mean?
Well, the discipline of going, no, I'm going to rest by doing nothing. That's my discipline, to do nothing. Like, well, it turns out doing nothing is it's just as unhealthy as doing everything, and horribly unrewarding and unfulfilling and strange. So it was after 3 months that I kind of thought, hang on a minute, I think there's a key lesson here. If I could redesign my life in the way that I'd like, I think work would actually be a part of it. And I kind of thought, and rest would be a part of it too, but I reckon I'd combine the two in every day rather than segment them. So that was kind of where I came up with 24 hours, spread across 7 days. Each day I'd have high energy, high intensity and focus, and then I'd have a nap after lunch. I'd go to the movies, I'd run, I'd ride, I'd have time for friends. And so I thought that's the ideal. had no idea how to finance that, but I thought that probably will come. I'm just clear about beginning with the end in mind. So then I went back into the business with that model, restricted myself to 24 hours a week, and things were okay. But then 5 years into that business partnership, I had this tension across my chest for 3 months. And I'd kind of prided myself before that on having a really good relationship with myself, listening to pain, great rapport, but I couldn't get to the bottom of this, what was going on, until one day I was driving to Canberra and I pulled over on the side of the road and I said, I'm not getting back on this road until I've sorted out what's going on. Clearly there's something here that I can't see or don't want to see, but I won't get back on the highway. Even if I'm here for a day, if I'm here for a week, I'm here till I sort this out. And then I apologized to myself for being such a prick by being so self-righteous, going, I've been banging on about how ready I am to listen to this pain. Clearly, if I was ready, I would have already heard. I'm afraid of what I'm about to hear. That's the truth. I've been avoiding this moment for 3 months at least. I'm really sorry about that. Here I am ready. I'm ready now. Whatever you've got to say to me, I'm ready. And instantly it was like, okay, cool. Thanks. You don't believe in this business partnership anymore. You know, it's not the vehicle that's going to take you where you'd like to go.
And is this happening in your head? Are you having an external dialogue with yourself, kind of like Fight Club type of a deal, or like what was it?
Yeah, hard to say, isn't it? It's a bit of an abstract kind of thing to try and explain.
Am I talking to Tyler Durden right now, or
who knows? Probably. But what I love how pragmatic these kind of conversations are. They're so testable because I think I'm having a conversation with myself. I think I've understood clearly, but the evidence is instantly this tension, which I've had for 3 months, stops. And instantly the sense of clarity and peace comes. So I go, that feels like good evidence that perhaps I've listened to something I've been avoiding listening to. And then there's this wisdom that does know what's happening for me now. And so I decided to trust that idea. And I instantly rang my business partner and said, I think I'm out. No, more than that, I am. I don't want to keep doing this anymore. And he was shocked, didn't see it coming, thought it was a terrible decision. Then I rang my team. I had 5 very similar conversations with each of them. They all were shocked, disappointed, felt it undervalued our relationship for 5 years, couldn't make sense of it. But I just knew that was right for me. And then amazingly, that same week, the opportunity opened up to move to Germany for 9 months. And so it was kind of like there was this incredible thing, like 9 months in Germany with a family, that is just, I don't think I'll ever replicate how wonderful that is. That is an extraordinary experience. And it wouldn't have happened had I clung to that old business partnership. So I'm just so grateful that I found a way out of that into the next thing. So then I was back out on my own again.
Just before we go there, I want to zoom into this conversation with yourself, right? What do you think is going on there, right? Because, I mean, you used to be in a community that, you know, that would have been interpreted as words from God.
100%.
Right? Or the light of Jesus, or, you know, whatever. You know, there's obviously the new age cult has its own, you know, pulling information from the Akashic records or whatever. I'm just curious, have you ever kind of considered that here's you walking through life with a set of opinions and ideas, and you've literally got to sit yourself down on the side of a highway and create a space for, you know, a new voice? Do you think that's a voice that's just in you? Is it another aspect of yourself? Is it outside of you, like a radio station being broadcast, and you're attenuating and attuning to a new frequency, picking up new information? I mean, what's your A, have you considered it, and B, what do you think?
Yeah, I know. I think about it all the time. And it was really an idea that got planted when I went to Tasmania for those 3 days. Ian Snape was very big on this idea of rapport with yourself. Just this idea of reconciling head and heart, mind and body, unconscious and conscious, just kind of becoming one, and realizing that there's great wisdom in our unconscious, that it's a pattern gathering machine, but typically sidelined or suppressed. And we're very conscious, dominant beings. So if you could learn to listen and make space for internal wisdom, you actually, and the Christian faith, you're right, made sense of that by saying that that's entirely external. That is God speaking directly to me. And that's how I'd always understood it. And then I started to realize, no, I think this is me. I think this is within me. I think there's this extraordinary, we're each extraordinary beings, capable of all kinds of wonderful creativity, have access to amazing wisdom by being human. So this idea of rapport with myself has become a guiding principle, so much so that it's at the top of the list. If I have to maintain, if I have to maintain rapport with someone else, and in doing so break rapport with myself, then I'm out every day of the week. It's just not worth it, because the moment I break rapport with myself, then there's chaos internally. I don't know what's up and down and right and wrong. But if I feel like there's peace, then I'm okay. My world's ordered.
So when you're talking to yourself, do you have is it another part of you in the present? Do you talk to yourself in the past or in the future? And in the present, is it you, or is it another aspect of you? Do you see yourself? Like what's the actual, is there an actual experience that you have?
Yeah, so there's a few. So pain has been a very useful tool for communication. And I think that makes sense to me. My unconscious doesn't have a vocal box, so we can't have an audible conversation. So it's often a kinesthetic one, which that works in my rational thinking. So if I get a pain signal, and I instantly, when I get a pain signal, I think there's something wrong, something broken, or something bad. And so I'll then think I need to go get it fixed. But then I kind of go, but hang on a minute, I haven't injured myself. This is weird. I don't think there's actually something broken. I think this is my unconscious trying to grab my attention. So if I could listen, then it's just a signal. If I could ask what for, then I could examine something here. And I think that if it is a signal, then there's a message to be understood. And if I could understand that message, I'd know I'd understood that message, because the pain would stop. So that feels really testable and pragmatic to me. And so I get my signal. If I break rapport with myself, I'll get sciatic pain almost instantly. So my piriformis muscle will just get tight. That's where my unconscious knows that that's a great strategy to get my attention. Just probably because I love running so much. So I get a tight ass and I can't run. And because I love running so much, I can't kind of put that off. It escalates the need to have a conversation. So I just go, okay, great. What am I missing? What have I not seen? What am I not paying attention to? What promise have I gone back on? What dangers am I not aware of? What wisdom am I missing? And so I'll come back to the table, and then I'll do a strategic meeting with myself, just like I would do a strategic meeting with a business partner or with Kat. I'll consciously come up with an agenda, and then I'll just listen to what else. And somehow over the years feel like I'm good at understanding when I speak to myself somehow.
That's wild. Do you keep a journal?
Yeah, but I very rarely go backward in my journal. My journals are very real time, just an opportunity for a very present conversation. So, and
I guess I'm asking, is the journal a mechanism for this conversation, or is it mostly just?
No, definitely.
Right.
No, I love writing. I love a blank page and a nice pen. Some of my most important possessions are those blank journals. So yeah, definitely writing is good for me.
It's just cool. It's rare. It makes me question. I've had this persistent cough for 9 weeks since the start of the year. I'm lightheaded. I can still manage to gather enough of my wits to work with our clients and do what I need to be doing. But, lifting weights, getting under the bar, going for runs, doing sprints in the front yard, it's like, just no. Like there's just no, it's not possible at this point. It's driving me out of my mind. I've just got some blood work, and I keep asking myself, like, what needs to come off my chest here? Like people might be able to see me. I'm muting myself. I'm coughing the way through podcasts and presentations, and it's like, I'm done already, and I'm on every supplement. I know I use blood test every quarter. I know, whether my, minerals are out or, any of that sort of stuff. So I know I don't have any deficiencies. It feels like my immune system is strong, and yet there's this persistent thing. Sarah's got it as well. I've had it for the same amount of time. So it's like, this is where I get in this weird, hang on, if it was psychosomatic, how come Sarah's got it? And I'm asking myself, and I'm doing all this journaling, I'm trying to find it out. And it's just not budging. So maybe I'm not listening enough.
Well, who knows? Because it's not everything.
Or maybe it's just a bacterial infection. I need a dose of antibiotics.
The way that I think about it, it's the same as if I was ever doing coaching with a couple and I set them a listening exercise. There's obviously discord, there's obviously tension between them, and I sit them down and say, right, just one exercise, make space to listen to each other this week. Can you do that? Yep, I can do that. They come back the next week, you can see they're tired, they're frustrated, you can see they haven't had a breakthrough, that's for sure. There's more angst than the week before. And turn to the husband and say, did you listen? Did you make space to listen? He says, yep, 100%. Every day I said, I'm ready, I'm listening. What do you want to say? Here, tell me, I'm ready, open, come on. But guess what? She wouldn't talk, wouldn't tell me shit. It's like, and then you turn to the wife and say, was he ready to listen? No. Like, of course you'd say, no. He was ready to jump on me. He was ready to belittle me. He was ready to justify his own position. He was ready to tell me why he already knew that. I'm desperate to be understood, but he wasn't ready. So no way, I'm not speaking until he's actually ready. And so I think about that all the time in terms of my own pain or not being ready to listen. I think the patterning is we only don't listen when we're afraid to listen. We're afraid of what we're going to hear. And I think that was my thing for 3 months, going, yeah, I'm ready, I'm listening. But clearly deep down, I knew that business had come to an end, but I didn't want to know that. I was pretending not to know that, because that was horrible to have those conversations and to open up uncertainty. But I've never once ever regretted listening to myself, never, because it always leads to life. It's always a wisdom conversation, and it leads to the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. And I love that I feel like I've got a good communication system, because it gives me confidence that I'll keep making good decisions at key moments, that I'll keep going where the life is and avoiding the things that are going to lead to death. So I enjoy thinking about that area of rapport with self and listening. And I think pain's a really interesting thing to explore.
You're an author, TED speaker, radio shows that goes out to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. You've become widely recognized as one of the leading life coaches in Australia. 4 books. How did that happen?
Goes back to the very first conversation you and I had. Oh, I can vividly remember that. And you said, what's your dream? What do you want, Jaemin? I said, I want to be the insecurity guy. And you're like, I don't get it. It's like saying you want to be the shit business guy. It's like, it doesn't really make sense. Yeah, I know that, but it is what I want.
But you don't know enough about me yet, Glenn, and I'm going to do it the way that I feel like I want to do it.
I did have a bit of that in me.
Damned.
I did have a bit of that in me. I remember talking to Sarah after that conversation. She and I had a few conversations about whether I would do the business accelerator.
But hang on a sec, because you already had the radio show. You were already on radio before that.
I already had the radio, right? But
had you done a book before that?
Yeah, I'd done 2 books before that.
Okay, so let's just make it very, very clear for people that this was an evolution, and yet you got involved in some of the stuff that we do. But like, I'm less interested in, like, I don't want people to think that there was this, like, you were broken when we met and then all of a sudden transformed, right? And so you already had 2 books, a radio show that was going out to hundreds of thousands of people, before, our team kind of bolt some stuff on. So let's just go back. Like, what came first, the radio show or the book? And kind of lead people, if you could just give people a bit of a context, like, because not everyone makes the decision that I've got to become more, I guess, visible and expressed in my industry. A lot of people want to look at, like, how do I stay behind the scenes? Granted, probably not in the coaching world. I think the default in the coaching world is like, get out and scream from the rafters. But again, not everyone executes as well as you have. So paint a bit of a picture of what the business looked like before, and then walk us through some of the evolutions that's kind of allowed you to get to the, very rarefied position you're in now.
So I think the first key point was when I was in Melbourne doing part of my coach training, and I for the first time said, I'm actually going to go write a book. I kind of thought about it for years and thought, I think I'm ready. I think I've got something to say now. And the message that I had was, I think this coaching skill set belongs in church world. So the first book that I wrote was called 12 Coaching Conversations Every Disciple Must Have. And it was a way of integrating my two worlds, because at that point, that Christianity was still the central sense-making paradigm, and I wanted to integrate it. But I can still remember casting that vision to Kat, my wife, and my best mate while I was in Melbourne. I rang him on the phone, told him that, and then I went back to the hotel where I was staying and wrote the first chapter of that book. And I was so excited and passionate and energized by that. But literally the second I shut the lid on that laptop, all that energy turned to fear and dread and, holy shit, what have I done? I put it out there. What if it's hopeless? What if no one reads it? What if I fail? What if I can't? And so that was kind of my first experience in insecurity and my own insecurity. I realized there was this monster inside me that if I didn't find a way of sorting out, I'd actually pull back from that edge and be paralyzed for that work. And so thankfully I was in a great space, the personal development space. I was in a good space to go sort that out. But that was kind of what started the seeds for the insecurity project, years later. So then, I solved the insecurity well enough then to write that book. Then the business partnership for 5 years, then on my own again. After reading Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, that was what really inspired the Germany experiment, to go see if I could get time, money, and mobility. Well, I felt like I'd got time back after the sabbatical year, but money and mobility seemed more elusive. Moving the family to Germany, not to get German clients, but just to deliberately cut off my ability to get local clients. And
so this was an experiment in forcing you to be able to make sales and deliver value online, right?
Yeah, that was exactly what it was. And I developed an online coaching program, a 30-day boot camp, and I had one person signed up to my first boot camp, selling it at $497.
You're like, right, we're going to Germany.
Yeah, one person had no plan B. That's it. Let's go, everyone.
Proof of what do you mean? This is proof of concept. We're good.
Yeah, it was incredible.
It's going to be great.
And we ran out of money.
You're right.
It worked okay, but we ran out of money halfway over, and Catherine confronted me about my money stuff while we were over there and said, sure, you're a good coach, but gee, you're hopeless at money and business, by the way. And I'm like, no, it's all happening. We're getting closer. We're nearly there. And she's like, you've told me that too many times. This is a disaster. You don't know how to do business. Oh man, you're right. And so then I'd come home, and then there was cricket. So I felt like I'd made some real progress with this online thing, but then come back to Australia and no one was interested. And then that's when I had to do some work as a bricklayer and builder's labourer. Some days I'd earn, hey?
How was that?
It was horrible, but very powerful, because for 3 months, I'd work these long, hot days, and sometimes I'd earn $150 for the day, maybe $180. And I just thought, one coaching session at $330, just one coaching session means I don't have to spend one day in the hot sun. Surely I could work out how to just do one coaching session again. So it just made me dive deeper and deeper into the fact that this had to work. I had to find a way to make this work. then it was, I got a bit of traction, had some extra energy around that, was getting a bit, but then still no real plan for how I was actually going to make it work. I knew I was a good coach. I knew I could get results, but the business structure was horrible. And then it was the sense of, right, well, I'm going to go really hard on insecurity. So there was a free coaching operation with the Business Enterprise Centre. You could get some hours of coaching the government were paying for. And so my BEC coach, I told him I was going to be the Insecurity Project, and he said, what's your plan B when that doesn't work? Like that, you can't be that. People are insecure about being insecure. So
that's what I said.
That's a terrible name.
It's like running a seminar for guys with small penises or something. It's like no one's going to that seminar.
That's what he said. And it knocked the wind out of my sails, because I had this big epiphany. Yes, the Insecurity Project, that's it. This is the solution. I've worked it out. And then he said, no, you can't do that. And for 3 days, I had my tail between my legs. And then I get in the car driving, talking to myself, and I hear myself say, Jaemin, stop being such a little bitch. Like, he's not your mum. Who cares if he doesn't see your vision? It's your vision. What do you want to do? And what are you prepared to do about it? And it was then I kind of put a flag in the sand and went, what I want is to lead a conversation globally about solving the insecurity problem. That is the only thing that I want. People suffer greatly for not knowing how to do this. I am convinced this is a problem that can be solved. That is the only thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to talk to the elephant in the room from the very start. That's going to be my strategy. And I think it suits my style to be wholehearted about something like that. People kind of feel that from me. They also feel that it's embodied. They feel that this is something that's out of the overflow of my own experience. And so they kind of let me lead them into a vulnerable position, that somehow I provide enough safety by who I am to have a vulnerable conversation. And so, then I get exposed to Dent somehow. I don't really, I spoke at an event and a guy gave me the KPI book. That's what it was. And then I read the book, did the test, got in a workshop, thought this would actually work. This is profound. Had a conversation with Sarah, thought there's no way I can afford it. Told Kat that I wanted to but couldn't afford it. She said, but you're not going to do it. Like, we actually can't afford it. And I said, yeah, I know, but I want to.
You suck with money, Jaemin.
And I suck with money. So here's another thing you're going to spend more.
Here's another thing you're going to do.
You got to spend money to make money. Just
come to Jesus, Jaemin.
Yeah. And she said, right, well, if you do this, this will be the last time you know that. I can't go around the mountain again. If this doesn't work, I don't have the energy to do another one of these things. And I thought about that, and I said, I don't think that's true, actually. I said, I think this will work, but even if it doesn't, this can't be the last time, because I promise you, quitting on this dream and going back and becoming a builder's labourer does not end the suffering. Down that path, that is not a happy path for either of us. Don't imagine I'd be happier being a guy doing something I don't love than at least the suffering I'm experiencing doing something I do love and I'm good at. So I'm going to find a way to make this work. And so again, kind of push back and somehow found a way to pay for it. And on day one, I made some pretty bold claims from day one, but it was useful to go, I'm all in. I said out loud to anyone who would listen, one day I'll be featured by Dent. One day I'll be on the podcast. One day I will be on some promotional material. I'm going to be a star student just because I'm going to take my medicine. This is going to work. Like I love frameworks. I think all you need to solve any problem is a proven framework and someone skillful enough to hold you in the space until it works. So I was very wholehearted about the process and trusted the idea that life and business would be hard until you're a key person of influence. And so then until that day, your full-time work is to become that key person of influence. So it really did make a massive difference. You're right. I had so much of the skill and the content all there, but I was speaking the wrong message in the wrong way to the wrong people. I had no structure. I was freestyling everything, constantly recreating the wheel, confusing people endlessly. So yeah, then off the back of that, things changed quite quickly, and here we are today.
Mate, it's you did have an incredible skill set, which is, I think, part of the key, but I'm curious as to your reflection on the message and how far off it was, because I mean, you're a preacher. You were good at messages, right? You were an evangelist. You got that, and I mean, you've clearly never struggled to make difficult decisions or have hard conversations, right? So, in that context of clearly having a lot of the raw materials, what was the glitch? What was the error that, in hindsight, you were making? And I say this, and I actually just want to talk to anyone listening in on the moment, because I really try for these podcasts not to become a fucking commercial for Dent. Like, I really do. I'm interested in the entrepreneur journeys, but for some of the people that I talk to, because a lot of them are clients, like it's just a part of the process. And so, but I also recognize, like, some people don't get a major breakthrough from stuff around pitching, and their breakthrough might be around product or profile or something else. And what you get out of pitch might be vastly different for what someone else gets out of it. So if we forget about like Dent or KPI being some catalyst or mechanism, and we just go into like the foundational stuff around your communications that shifted, and maybe some of the new principles or insights that you had around it. But yeah, less about Dent. And talk to me through the before and the after with your pitch and your message for someone that might be able to resonate with the fact that they've got all these raw materials, but they seem to suck at just getting those marbles out of their mouth.
Yeah, sure. I think there was a challenge that lingered from my Christianity, the nice guy and the reaching the poor. There's a big emphasis in Christianity on reaching the marginalized and the poor and the downtrodden. There's a sense of
the church has really not been great at accumulating wealth for itself. You're right.
No, and so I'd kind of some parts of it are, but
I get
some parts really are. Anyway, I was kind of feeling like the bleeding heart. So I was constantly attracting disempowered housewives who were very insecure, but it was kind of their first foray into any personal development. They were a long way back. The idea of spending any money on themselves to solve that problem was a difficult thing. They'd never really experienced much success before, so it was also scary and also new. So the amount of work required to shift the needle for them, I could shift it, but it required everything, and I was not very well rewarded. But they just, no matter what I said or what I put out there, they were the people I seemed to attract. So I think the pitch was, hang on. What's the most fun? Like, who do you think you could actually help the most? If you could have anyone, where would you enjoy? Who lights you up? And I just thought, well, ambitious people who are trying to do good in the world, people who've already experienced some success, people who are already on their way. They've got a business plan, they've got a marketing plan. They just haven't ever really solved this internal barrier. And if they could do that, they're on their way. And those people could see this as an investment. They'd see it as a return on investment. If they could solve this, they know their potential. They know they're sitting on a mountain value. They just haven't been able to access it internally. So it was the courage to go, well, what if I just spoke to those people? And the target's not in the market. So that doesn't mean I have to exclude anyone. But if I just it was very intentional about speaking to the ideal client. So that was a profound moment. And then I decided how much it would cost for me to work with them. And I said, another line in the sand, I will never solve this problem again for less than $6,000. I just won't. That's how much it will cost for me to bring my skill set to solve that problem. So there's only a certain number of people who would pay that amount of money to solve this problem. So that simplifies my life.
What had you previously been charging?
Well, $495 was the first iteration, and I'd bumped it up to $1,000.
Oh, yeah.
$1,000 was the most I charged before that.
Got it. So that's a 6x increase.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, 6 times. That's big. That's not small.
No, it's not small. Yeah, so it was right. Who's my target? Yep. Who could I work with best? How could I understand their problem and what this is worth to them? All right, be very clear about just speaking to them. then to help value stack. So that, like, these sales conversations I was having with people, once I identified they were my people, they were random, they were weird, they were freestyling. I'd lose sales by over talking. So just the idea of, it's my job to educate them on value. That's my job, and to do that in a predictable way, and to help them see the return on investment. That's not their job. And money's the reward you get for accurately understanding your value in the world. So then I got predictable about my slide deck, and it was an extraordinary experience then going, okay, here's the right person. Now I'm going to talk to them in the right way. Watch what happens next. And it was such an easy conversation. It blew my mind how easy that was.
Do you remember the first time you used that like draft deck that you put together on someone and pitched $6,000?
Yeah, absolutely. I do.
Talk us through that.
I do. Well, I was like watching myself having this conversation going, you're going to stuff this up. Hang on a minute. You can't say that. I'm just like, I'm going to trust the process. And there was this.
First of all, how'd you get them? How'd you get them? So here's the perfect audience in your new target market, right? Like perfect person. They fit that. So how did you come across them? Was that from marketing or referral? Like you'd set this intention, like I'm working with high achievers now.
Great. So that was, I got on some podcasts. So I had some clear stuff around the insecurity stuff. I'd been putting that on my radio spot for ages. And then I had an opportunity to go on the Property Couch podcast through a random connection. And that was actually my truck driver mate who listens to podcasts all the time told me I had to reach out to the Property Couch. And I didn't see it, but I followed his lead and did that, and lo and behold, they'd heard me on radio and were very interested in my message and had me on their show. So all of a sudden now I'm speaking to people who are investing, who are better with money, who are running businesses. So then I'm attracting that group of people, and then I have an opportunity for them to come to a strategy session with me, do a workshop with me, and then this one-on-one sales call, taking them through the deck. And I think the one thing that I was struggling to understand was this switch up between there's education and then there's sales. And I used to make that so clunky to switch gears. And then I'd lose a lot of sales by how awkward that was. And the glitch was just have to ask for permission. Would it be okay?
Unpack that a bit. Imagine someone has no idea what you're talking about.
Well, so I highlight the problem. They've understood that I know their problem. Then they assume I also know the solution. So I unpack a bit of the solution around that. Then I ask, would it be okay to show you how I deliver that solution, just so you're aware of what my offering is? And they go, well, that would be wonderful if you could show me. And so they're desperate for me then to go, okay, well, let me show you numbers. Let me talk about what this looks like.
So essentially they've given you permission to sell.
They have, and at the start of the conversation too, I've framed their expectation by saying, I'm going to give as much value as I can here. I'm going to help you understand your problem. At the end, I'm going to show you how I deliver this. Would that be okay as well? So I ask for permission right at the start, and then I make sure I've got permission at the end, and then it's very seamless. And they're super excited.
That's really you calling the elephant in the room as well, which is what you said you were always going to do from the start, because people are sitting in there going, where's the other shoe going to drop? Like, what's this guy's agenda? What's he up to? We don't trust salespeople. So the moment you frame that agenda, like, I'm not trying to pull the wool out of your eyes. I'm going to present you some value and then talk about how we might be able to work together. You cool with that? And everyone's like, yeah, of course. Like, that was the expectation. But now it's been named.
Yep.
It's like a pressure cooker draining all the awkwardness out of the room.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I value stack. I say, let me just show you what I'm delivering, and I'll just help you understand the value that this represents. Now I'm also going to help you understand the return on investment. I'm going to help you see what it's costing you already not to solve this problem, and help you put a figure on what it's worth to you to actually solve this. So then it just was so easy. They're like, this makes a lot of sense. I'm already going to spend this money anyway if I don't solve this problem. So I may as well spend it on a solution rather than waste it on a problem. And it was just easy. And I just couldn't believe how easy it was. So I stayed at $6,000 for probably 6 months. And then I went, that's not even the right number. This is actually a $10,000 problem for these entrepreneurs. I'm saying that it's going to earn you 100 grand if you solve this problem. It's 100 grand ROI across 5 key performance indicators. So 10 grand to earn 100 grand, it's a no-brainer still. And again, people didn't even blink. Just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Gave them 2 options. You can pay up front, make it a bit cheaper, pay it off over 6 months. Cool. Let's do it. Yeah. And the joy of going, you're kidding. Like, I wasn't deluding myself. I wasn't. I am. Yeah. Yeah. Like,
it's like in the Matrix where Neo kind of does that.
Yeah. The walls go boom.
Because I know with every cell in my body that once they're in, I know they're going to have a great experience. I know I'm not going to overpromise and underdeliver. I know I can do what I said. That's a very predictable problem with a predictable solution. So it's easy once they're in. It was just getting them in. So yeah, it's just been an extraordinary experience seeing money in the bank. Not working more than my 24 hours, like I said, being able to do it location independent, time, money, mobility, and doing meaningful work. So beautiful.
It's pretty cool. Why more books?
Well, Jerry Seinfeld tricked me into being a writer over Christmas. I was listening to Tim Ferriss interview him, and like I've written reluctantly every time I found it so incredibly difficult, a high level of suffering to write. But he kind of defined himself as a writer, and that was interesting to me. I thought he was a comedian, but he says, no, I'm a writer. That's what I do. Comedy is the art of writing. Well, and then he said, but by the way, don't let anyone let you believe they know how to write. Writing is impossible. It's the hardest of all the jobs in the world. So any words you write is profound. So that was nice to hear. And then he just had a whole bunch of cool things to say about writing. And I had this instant kind of resonance to go, I feel like that's the evolution of me being me is to identify with being a writer. Excuse me. So being a writer is the central sense-making paradigm. And I feel like it is the most important way to fulfill the mission that I have, which to summarize the mission, I think it is around ending unnecessary suffering in the world. There's a whole bunch of suffering that's entirely necessary and useful, and there's a bunch of suffering that could be avoided. And if I have something to say that could help people who are suffering not suffer, it would be unkind to hold that back. So, I think insecurity is a problem that people suffer unnecessarily for. I think it's a problem that can be solved. Not many people would agree with that, but that doesn't matter. That's what I've written about. The next book I'm writing is a difficult one. It's called Leverage: How to Change the People You Love, and it kind of
is difficult.
Yeah, because it kind of addresses this idea that, hang on, that's inappropriate. You're not supposed to change people. No. But the point is, if you don't find a way to change the people you love, they'll annoy the shit out of you and you'll hate them. And you'll actually try and change them anyway, but you'll do it without any skill. Badly. So it's going to end in tears anyway. So husbands are supposed to change wives. Parents are supposed to change kids. Friends are supposed to improve each other. But there's a bunch of skill to understand about how to do that. So, and you'll suffer if you don't know how to be assertive and have conflict and have difficult conversations. So I might as well write about that. But that's going to be a difficult book to market. You know, imagine buying that. You come home with this book on your arm. What do you got there, darling? Oh, nothing.
You're going to need like
change the people you love.
A different dust jacket for it. I want to circle back because I want to. You talked about when you were talking about. I think this is interesting. You were talking about when people are happy to sign up for the $6,000, $10,000, and you talk about. I can't remember your words. The 5 success metrics, or the 5 KPIs, or the 5 So there are obviously things that you measure against, or that people can benchmark against, and that can, identify an improvement in.
Yep.
Can you because obviously when you say insecurity, right, I think imposter monster. Is that a similar, like, is that part of the same thing, or is that a different thing? Because I'm trying to orient people that when we go through some of these metrics, it's like, is that relevant for me type thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, people are insecure about being insecure, so it's a difficult one to pin down. And I think my own thoughts about the imposter monster is that is language that actually makes things worse, not better, because it's just imprecise. I like Jordan Peterson rule 10 in his 12 rules. Be precise in your speech. Things that go unnamed become monsters and consume you. So I have people all the time that tell me they struggle with the imposter monster but aren't insecure. And I think that's strange, because to be an imposter is the fear of being found out as fake or not who you say you are, which is the heart of insecurity. To call it a monster or call it a syndrome is to think the problem's outside of you. It's something that's afflicting you that's not you. I think the heart of insecurity, it's not the fear of being found out. It's not the fear of failure. It's not the fear of rejection. It's actually the personal implication of those things. If you were to be found out, if you were to fail, if you were to be rejected, what does that say about you? Now it's personal. It kind of highlights the thing you're most afraid of about yourself.
And are you saying there's 5 like things that you can you, so you're saying you can break that apart in terms of 5 individual things? Like, help me understand what you measure.
Yeah, sure. So then people try and solve the problem where they see the pain show up in their life. So they see pain in their health, they see it in their finances, their relationships, their work, or their sense of purpose in general. And they see it in their business. They see a lack of assertiveness. They see productivity down. They see inefficiencies. They see, undervaluing products and services. That's kind of where they see the pain. And because that's where they see the pain, they think that's where the problem is. But I would say a bit of gentle inquiry highlights that underneath that, there are fears, personal fears about ourselves that show up in those places. And if you can examine them clearly enough, you realize that at the deepest level, it's always the fear of our own opinion of ourselves that's underneath that dysfunction. So that's what I've devoted my life to thinking about. How does anyone address the fears about their own opinion of themselves? And I think it's a predictable problem with a predictable solution.
I just love it. And so it does, but let's keep going, which is, what are those? I'm curious, because you said there are 5 metrics that we can measure against. I'm curious as to what those are.
Yeah, great. So in general, if you solve insecurity, it has to show up in your health. So weird health stuff is often a form of hiding. Patterns of sickness, patterns of extra weight, patterns of illness or injury are often about pulling back from the edge, some kind of patterning around lowering the expectation you have on yourself and others have on you. Also, you don't get found out. If you were to show up present and unguarded, be at your best, what if your best isn't good enough? Well, then you're exposed. So unconsciously, there's a bunch of unhealth that shows up because of insecurity. So if you're not experiencing better health, more vitality, better sleep, then we haven't solved the insecurity problem. Relationships, people stay in dysfunctional relationships for insecurity. Well, if I don't have this person, maybe I'll have no one. I can't actually confront this person about their bad behavior because then maybe they'd leave. So there's a bunch of really tough areas that people experience relationally, all because of their own insecurity. They show up needy, which is the most unattractive way you could ever position yourself in a relationship. I need you to love me because I don't feel great about myself, so please accept me and affirm me, which just is very toxic. So if you rebuild the relationship with yourself and solve the insecurity problem, that has to look differently in your relationships. Out of a loving relationship with yourself, then you're able to train others how to treat you lovingly as well. So if your relationships aren't improving, we haven't solved the insecurity problem. Money, we use money to ascribe value to things. So where there's a lack of personal value, it has to show up in your relationship with money. One of the clearest indicators of insecurity. Money is the reward you get for accurately understanding your value in the world. So if you're not experiencing a happier relationship with money, then again, we haven't solved the insecurity problem. Purpose. if people suffer because they don't know why they're here or what they're doing, that they think that's just not clear. They just haven't worked it out yet. But the people who don't find their own purpose end up serving someone else's purpose, or because they don't think they're good enough to have their own thing. They don't think they're special enough, or if they think they pursued it, maybe they'd highlight their inadequacies. So again, if you're not feeling more connected to meaningful purpose and actually being the kind of person who can execute against that, well, we haven't solved the insecurity problem. And work. So I think people suffer greatly, in a job they don't enjoy, or because it's paying the bills, afraid of stepping out and doing their own thing, pursuing the entrepreneurial dream in case it fails and highlights there's something wrong. So if you're not feeling more inclined to step out and run your own business, I think the natural progression of adulthood is always towards entrepreneurship. The spiral dynamics idea suggests beyond system is entrepreneur, and that is maturity. The only people who never do their own thing and stay serving someone else's vision, again, are the people who don't think they're good enough to do that. So it has to look like traction toward business and entrepreneurship if you're solving the insecurity problem. So that's all those KPIs are being measured and tracked the whole time I'm coaching someone.
How? Like literally, how do you track them? Is it a bit of paper? Do you have some technology? Like do you have a framework? Like, I'm just curious as to how practically that gets tracked, measured, reviewed. Like, is it just in a spreadsheet?
So monthly check-in around each of those areas. There's goals set at the start of the program around what they're looking for, how they would know that they've made progress there, and then turning in the numbers from their own subjective experience each time, and having the objective feedback of the coach track those numbers as well. It's also tracked slightly differently through the algorithm. I've developed an algorithm for monitoring progress through the 7 essential practices. So it looks like a really mysterious and subjective experience, but very predictable. Over 10,000 coaching hours, patterns have emerged very clearly around the kind of people who solve this as opposed to those who don't. And so the algorithm works by analyzing the data of language and turning it into numbers. So when people are getting 8s, 9s, and 10s on that algorithm for each of the 7 practices, then it's showing up as dramatic progress in each of the 5 KPIs as well.
Got it. So the KPIs are the effect, but then you've actually got these 7 things which are the cause. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. And I'm saying with 100% certainty, if you're practicing these 7, you cannot not experience transformation. And I can show you definitively if you're practicing them.
And that's the Unhindered book.
Yeah, that's the Unhindered book. Absolutely. Yep. Yeah,
right. So can we go through some of those?
The 7?
Well, just give us a taste at least. Yeah. Help. Because I think it's great that you've got the effect measured. Like, how do we measure the cause? How do we move the needle? Yeah,
sure. So practice 1 is to step into the light. Yoda says, named must your fear be, before banish it you can. So the human condition is we want to be good, but we're afraid we're bad. And because there's that deep fear in our unconscious, we either run or hide. Practice 1 is face up instead. It's to be willing to stop running and stop hiding. Whether you should be insecure or shouldn't be insecure, it's to actually name your fear. Big deal. And I'm not saying any of these are easy or any of these are common, but this is the way anyone has ever solved this problem. So the willingness to come out and say, yeah, okay, all right, I am afraid. And to do some work around being precise. So not just I'm afraid of failing, it's if I was to fail, I'm what actually I'm afraid that would reveal I am a failure personally. It would say something really bad about me. I'm not just afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of if I was to be rejected, that would highlight I'm not worthy of love and there's a deficiency. So yeah, I am most afraid of my own opinion of myself. But even just articulating that in that language, this is just an opinion problem. And realizing more than that, it's just the opinion of a child. That's the real problem. You formed these opinions when you were very young and they haven't been reviewed since. They've just gathered evidence. And that's the operating system still being driven by the opinion of a child. So opinions are the lowest form of knowing anything. Therefore, they're the easiest thing to change. So you'll be okay. And like so much of my job as coach is it just feels like coaxing scared kittens out from underneath a lounge with a saucer of milk. So
What a
fear
great
unexamined
picture.
grows. Like people are so scared. What if the child was right? What if I am no good? What if this inquiry just reveals the truth? It's like, yeah, great. Well, if that's true, you die. Like that's the end of the story. But it's not true. Like it's the opinion of a kid. Tell me when the kid has ever got it right. How could the kid get it right? They're a kid trying to make sense of the chaotic adult world. I promise you they could not have got it right. Even when they told beautiful stories, they didn't get it right. It's all a work of fiction. You'll be all right. Come on, little kitten. That's practice one. So then when people identify there is an insecurity problem, they're then curious as to where it started and why. And often they position themselves as a victim when they go exploring that. Oh, yeah, I know I'm insecure. This is because my dad didn't love me or my parents got divorced or I was bullied. So then they think about what's happened to create this, which is misdirection. Practice two is 100% responsibility. And primarily that's just an understanding of the fact we're sense-making creatures. So we go into the world, we have experiences, but we have to decide what they mean. We're asking and answering two questions at all times. Question one, what does this mean? Question one, why is this happening? Question two, and what does it mean about me? So as a kid in pain, answering those two questions, inevitably the answer is going to get messy and personal. So that's what creates insecurity. We're not the actor in the story, we're the storyteller. We're the one with the pen making agreements against ourselves. So that's a big deal to kind of realize this problem wasn't created outside of you. So it's not going to be solved outside of you either. Because people get in this trap where they think, oh, I was affected by mean people, therefore I need loving people to fix me. Like, no, you're the bully in this story. You were the one that said you were no good. And until you change that narrative, you'll be held captive by that. Practice three is to stack the pain. The only people who solve this do so from a place of great pain. This is part of my pitch too, was to realize that age is really important part of my pitch. So I typically pitch to 35 to 45-year-olds because I don't think 20-year-olds have enough pain around insecurity typically. And predominantly 60-year-olds
they haven't felt the consequence of banging their head against the same wall or noticing the same cycles repeating throughout their life.
And interestingly, insecurity could really be serving them. I think insecurity is like rocket fuel in your 20s a lot of the time because you've got something to fight against. Once someone's slighted you or told you can't, so then you're hell-bent to prove that you're better than that. So that's really useful. And they're not ready for wisdom around solving this yet. But
are you familiar with the hero's journey?
Sorry?
Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell?
This is the hero's journey. 100% this is the hero's journey.
You agree that overcoming insecurity is the killing the father moment in the hero. Is that the point?
Yeah, absolutely. All kinds of ways of referencing that, slaying the dragon, rescuing your father from the belly of the whale.
Got it.
All kinds of things. Absolutely. So, but pain is really important because pain is a loving message to move you from danger towards safety. And so pain causes you to do things you wouldn't do if you're not in pain. So I love talking to people who are exhausted, who've been banging their head against the wall, and they're ready to do whatever it takes. And because typically people link a lot of pain to self-awareness and then pleasure to avoiding self-awareness. But there comes a point where you're like, I'm not getting anywhere by avoiding this. And this is so costly to stay in this position. And it's costing me everything, my health, my finances, my relationships, my purpose. All right, so whatever's involved in confronting this fear couldn't be as bad as staying here. So I think just doing an accurate cost assessment of how these opinions you formed as a child are actually ruining your life is an essential practice for solving this. And I love the example of smoking. You'd think it'd be impossible to smoke in today's age, but plenty of people smoke and they do so just by not accurately reviewing the cost. So insecurity is killing each one of us, but you can continue on just by not paying attention to that fact. If you did pay attention to it, you'd realize how damaging it is, and that would be useful because it would
and
demand
not just to self, but to others, and the whole thing. When you get the perspective, perspective is interesting for that. I remember at Tony Robbins going through the Dickens process that he has, where he gets you to identify something you don't like about yourself in the present, and then he's like, "Well, how are you going to feel, a year from now if you haven't changed it?" And then he gets you to go there, like really go there, and you're in this room with 5,000 people, and then one woman or one dude starts crying like, then all of a sudden it's like 5 years, and then it's like, everyone starts wailing, and then it's 20 years, you're still fat, sick, tired, broke. You're in this this room like in the 7th level of hell or something, and it's like, oh my God. And I was on the floor like blubber and snot like everybody else, but it's a visceral crystal ball experience for bringing the pain, the potential for pain that's frozen in the future, melting it all and wearing it in the present to be like,
100%.
nah. And without that recognition of the consequence. And I guess this is like the definition of ignorance, right? We want to be ignorant to the pain and the pain of the future. And so we continue to be ignorant and we don't explore those costs. And so we continue to repeat the behaviors and the decisions that perpetuate the pain. And so by trying to ignore the pain, the irony is we perpetuate the pain, right?
It's madness. So you're right. Pain is so useful. It's a gift, creates threshold moments where then you go, okay, whatever it takes, I'm moving forward.
How do people get the book?
Necessary. Sorry?
How do people get the book?
Unhinderedbook.com. You can get it for free at the moment.
This could be around for a while.
Well, I'm happy. I say it on that landing page. If people are willing to read it, if they're willing to write a review about it and pass it on, if it's as good as I say it is, then I'm still happy to give it away for free.
Right, that's awesome. Why do you give it away for free?
Well, it's a clever strategy to make it easy for people to face something difficult. And the quid pro quo on it is then they're part of my ecosystem. So it's like, cool. Well, if you like that, then you're going to have a chance to buy some other stuff from me. So, and on the way I've set it up on my landing page is that you get the book for free if you pay postage. But then before you've checked out of the shopping cart, you've had a chance to buy my other 2 books, get the short course, which fast tracks the application of the book. And then you're in my product ecosystem. So the average cart spends up around $26. So people end up paying more than they would if they just paid for the book anyway. So it's a strategy that's working well for me at the moment. And it also means I maintain distribution. So rather than going down the publishing route or having it stocked elsewhere, I might sell more copies, but then I never meet those people who bought it. Now I'm the only one who distributes it. So everyone who buys it comes into my world as well. So I get to stay connected. So that's been my strategy.
When you say product ecosystem, could you walk us through how you see your business model working?
Yeah, so people will there's a few ways people can find out about me. The radio spot, so the 1 Minute Coach, they can listen to that on radio for free. There's a call to action to go to the 1 Minute Coach website, which directs them then to the 1 Minute Coach book. So that's all 365 segments now are in a book. So it's kind of a no-brainer if they've enjoyed that. So then they buy that book, and when they buy that book, then they get introduced to, well, if you like this book, you might also enjoy the Insecurity Project and the Unhindered book. So once they've gone down that path, then they get introduced to and integrated across to the Insecurity Project, or they hear my podcast, and then there's an opportunity, a call to action to get the book. Or someone else's podcast and an opportunity to get the book. Then from there, the next step is to do the short course. If you've enjoyed the book, here's the next logical step is to do a self-coaching exercise to help apply the content of the book. So I'm going to, here's an 8-part video series. It's going to cost you $100 or so, depending on which channel you get it from. It'll step you through. And at the end of that, there's a free 30-minute coaching call with me to help them really tie together everything they've learned, which is an opportunity then for me to introduce them to the next thing, which would be a strategy session with me if they fit the picture of my ideal client. The other channel they can come, I've got a test that's on a bunch of different platforms. So insecurity, it's a vulnerable subject. Why don't you test yourself to see how insecure you are? And so it's kind of a fun thing. But everyone who takes that test joins my funnel as well. And there's an opportunity for me then to reach out and say, how accurate did you find the test? Here, if you've identified insecurity as a problem, well, then the next logical step is to get the book, because that's going to help you solve the problem. When you get the book, then do the short course. You've done the short course, now do a strategy session. Done a strategy session, that's an opportunity for me to then introduce you to my core product. If you're not right for my core product, I can downsell you to just 6 coaching sessions. Then there's opportunities to do a retreat with me. Again, all to then work them back up to the core product, which is the $10,000 Unhindered experience.
It's tight.
Well, thank you. It feels that's the tightest thing I've ever had, and it's working really well. And I don't hear from people. All the front end stuff kind of takes care of itself. It's all automated. So when someone actually calls me, they're red hot. They've been through all my stuff. They're so excited to be on the phone with me. I haven't cold called them, and they're just super keen to do the next thing.
Mate, I love it. Question. I can't quite remember. I can't remember if it was a phone call or an email or whether we were at an event together, but it was when you got the invitation to speak at TED.
Yeah.
Do you remember, not necessarily the interaction with me, but take us back to that, because that's cool, man. Yeah,
well, it was a really amazing experience because I'd thought TED, that's the ultimate. Imagine getting an opportunity. Canberra were running a TEDx event, and there was a channel to get selected there. You go through their open mic forum. So you had to pitch for that. So I got selected for the open mic, which was great. Did a 2-minute open mic thing and didn't get selected, which I just couldn't understand. I thought I just nailed it. But anyway, didn't fit their theme or whatever. So I thought, oh, what a shame. I don't know how else I'm going to get there then. But then amazingly, I got an email from a guy in Adelaide who'd been listening to my 1 Minute Coach radio segment for the last 3 years, had read my book without me knowing. So kind of the 7-Eleven-4 stuff. There's product, there's content out there in the world doing its thing while I'm asleep. And he said, clearly you're an expert in this field. We're running a TEDx youth event. The theme is purpose. I'm fascinated by your take that to solve the purpose problem, you've actually got to solve the insecurity problem first. Would you be willing to come to Adelaide? And so rather than me pushing into TEDx, they came and found me. So it was even better. I just thought, you little beauty. And so, yeah, the experience of swanning around Adelaide like a B-grade celebrity doing TEDx, what a mountaintop experience. And
so you walk out, you're sitting on, you're standing on the red dot.
Yeah.
Right. You're looking up at a big audience. Like, how did that moment feel?
Yeah, it just felt right. It really did. And it was a strange experience preparing for that, because first I thought you had an auto cue, like you could actually read it. And then I realized, no, this is all rehearsed. And I'd struggled preparing this to really get it. And I had to submit it to them 3 times and they'd knocked it back twice. Didn't like my take on it. And so it was difficult to get it right. And then I actually rewrote the whole thing anyway on the plane going down to Adelaide, but just thought, I finally got it. I'm finally feeling it now. Rehearsed it, got out there, took a moment, looked around and delivered it. And I delivered it perfectly, which was just an amazing experience, just to, again, watch myself talking and it's coming out exactly the way that I wanted it to be coming out. Just walking off the stage going, yeah, well done. You made that your bitch. You nailed it. That was a great experience. And just thinking, like, it's one thing to get given an opportunity and then mess it up, but another thing to get given the opportunity and then to make the most of that opportunity. So it was everything that I dreamed it would be. And lovely.
How do you think that experience, or not the experience, but like being the author, the speaker, the podcaster, the commentator, the TEDx speaker. You know, people go to your site and it's like it's all there. When you think back to slinging bricks, you're that guy, to now you're this guy. Is there a difference?
Oh, well, yes and no. I think the great pain of the bricklaying was just going, I don't think I'm delusional. That's the pain. If I was delusional, that would be easier, because I go, what? Get your head out of your ass. Can you just settle down a bit? Like, this is your lot. This you're not awesome. You're just a guy. Can you just settle down? Like, but it was the feeling of not being delusional, going, it would be easier if you didn't have this message, if you didn't have this dream, if you didn't want that would be far easier, but you do. And it feels honest and authentic, and it's meaningful suffering to pursue this path. So just keep showing up, keep doing the thing. So I feel, so in some ways it felt no different at all. It's the same guy, and coming to terms with or being all in on that guy. But then obviously the experience to go, wow, now not only am I just visioning this guy and talking about this guy, but other people are seeing me as that guy as well. That's what's changed.
It's pretty wild, huh?
Yeah, very wild. Yeah.
Yeah. I love seeing it. I love seeing it. I think, when someone like yourself that has such a pure heart with good intentions, backed up with the skills to actually move the world, that person bricklaying, it's like, no, no. But it's hard, right? And one of the reasons I was really interested in having this conversation with you is, because what do I evangelize? Well, I evangelize the idea that leaders need to lead from the front. Leaders need to evangelize their vision, their mission, their values, their value proposition. Like they need to be proud of being able to communicate why someone should work with them over their competition, and pay a premium and join a waiting list for the privilege, and yet on all those points, most people melt and they're just like, I just want to sell something and make some money.
Yeah.
And I think, why? And I believe it has something to do with this sort of insecurity. I was talking to an engineer today, and he's like talking about like this idea, and I'm talking about, could you imagine yourself speaking at a conference, like a big building conference? This is a successful guy in the engineering world, like 15, 20 people on the team, steel fabrication, that kind of stuff. I'm like, and he's like, oh, public speaking scares the shit out of me. And I'm like, well, all right. So you got a bunch of people on the team. So you teach them how to use the metal lathe and the turning. I didn't know what I was talking about then, but he's like, yeah, I can talk. So if you're in front of an audience of 100 people, could you talk about how to use that? It's like, yeah. Could you talk about how to reinforce the structure of a building? He's like, oh, actually, yeah, that's fine. So it's like, you're not actually uncomfortable talking to people. You're just not sure what you talk to them about. And the moment that penny drops, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm actually quite comfortable talking in front of people so long as it's something that I know something about.
Yeah, sure.
But, right. And yet people haven't spent the time. He spent a long time learning engineering and fitting and turning, but hadn't spent a lot of time clarifying vision, mission, purpose, values, value proposition, all that jam. And who knows? We'll see. The penny seemed to drop for him, where he was like, wow, actually, yes, if I took the time to unpack that stuff and organize that stuff, I'd probably be pretty damn confident in front of a big audience. And you start to see this veil of what he thought was a fear or an inadequacy wasn't. It was just a misunderstanding of, I just don't have enough experience in that particular space. It's not a fear of public speaking at all. There was this false projection that was steering his decision making into a very functional area of his business, which wasn't rewarding or fulfilling. And I just think how much potential is frozen in individuals and in small business owners, particularly because of insecurity.
It is extraordinary. And you're right. It's such a misunderstanding. It's a strange problem. It shouldn't be a problem. It's all built on a work of fiction. Like, I'm surprised at how scared people are about this area and how much they avoid it, because every time when you go back and examine, like, oh, yeah, that's actually not even true. That doesn't even make sense. Not sure why I thought that. But fear unexamined grows. That's the mechanics of it. Every time you run and hide, the monster gets bigger, it gets more daunting, more true, more solidified, to the point of madness, to the point where you're actually paralyzed, and therefore you never reach your potential and die with the music inside you. And then we all miss out on the gift. So it's an important thing, but a very basic level. I think it's a ticket to the game. It's like graduating your HSC or finishing a TAFE certificate or an apprenticeship. It's not the main game. It's a qualifier to the game. But if you don't get it, you're kind of held back in how you can go play. But yeah, I know that's a big part of the insecurity project, helping dial down the angst around this problem. To help people go, oh, okay, shouldn't be that hard. Let's go do it.
You got a bit more time?
Yeah, of course.
You're a fit dude. You run marathons, you ride long distance street bikes, etc. I'm assuming as a result, to a degree at least, health, nutrition, diet is reasonably dialed in. Like, I don't know, that's an assumption, but is that safe to say?
Yeah, I do eat a fair few crinkle cut chips though, to be honest. Plain crinkle cut chips.
Gotta get your carbs from somewhere. My question is, when you're when you're coaching people, is that a part of it? Do you have a prescription that kind of like, gets them to examine, the consequences of sugar and high lows of, insulin crashes? Like, is that part of it at all or not?
Never. It's
never.
The focus of my work with people is based on the presupposition that the body craves health. So health is the default. If you had full permission from your own self to show up at your best and come out of hiding, then you would naturally have this tendency toward health rather than away from it. You wouldn't need to be overweight. Weight would no longer serve a purpose. Unhealth would no longer be serving you, so you could let go of it. And so, quite interestingly, you would find your own way of heading toward health. Either that would mean you would come across people who can help you with nutrition. You'd find exercise that is, conducive to your body type or your own interests. So my job is not ever to prescribe a specific way toward that. Through discipline. I think discipline's massively overrated. I think the upgrade is definitely permission. So my job is, if I can help them get permission from themselves to shine and to show up, come out of hiding, then they'll work out the health stuff quite naturally from there.
What about you personally, right? So your own guidance, what is your own guidance not prescribe or guide or give you permission to do? Basically, I'm asking, how do you run your life from a health nutrition perspective?
Sure. So running is very life-giving for me. So I run most days. If I'm not running, there's a good local cycle club, so I'm probably cycling 2 or 3 times a week, and doing a bit of swimming every now and then. I've just signed up for an ocean swim, the first time I've done one of those, just as a way of exploring a new boundary. And it's been interesting giving myself permission in that area, because I've not traditionally been a strong swimmer, but feeling like that's time to explore that area and watching my natural ability to improve in that, not because I'm forcing myself or fighting myself, just listening and trusting.
I hate swimming in the ocean. I mean, I hate swimming in I hate swimming in the ocean, like deep ocean. I mean, I sailed around the world. I spearfish. I surf. Lifesaver in Bondi. Retired. So like I'm a beach boy and I'm an ocean boy. I'm a reef boy. I dive. I free dive. But swimming in the surf on the surface, like a kilometer from shore in deep water where you can't see the bottom. I was sailing with my dad. It gives me the willies, something fierce. The willies. I was sailing with my dad from the Gold Coast to New Caledonia. So it's about a 3 or 4 day sail. And there was this day in the middle where it was dead calm, like glass and no wind. And we're just kind of sitting there. And this was only a few years ago. And when we sailed around the world as a family, when I was really young, one of the jobs that sucked was you jump over the side with a mask and a snorkel and a scrubbing brush and you clean the growth off the hull. And so Dad, I think, was like finding some nostalgia in handing me a snorkel and some fins and a scrubbing brush and said, we're running a knot slow. I think we've got some growth under there. Can you clean it off? And I'm like, so we're in 2 miles of water. Like it's almost as close to infinite as you're going to get in the ocean. And so, and crystal clear. And so over I jump and I'm getting the mask on and then I look down and I don't know if you've ever been to the edge of a really tall cliff or a really tall building without a rail and you get that hit of, oh shit, it's a long way down, like step back. Like there's that human instinct of like, oh, like large drop. Well, anyway, the same thing happened because it was crystal clear water. And so essentially my brain had this perception of falling, like infinite vast void of crystal clearness straight down. And the light rays were kind of like accentuating this chasm of, and it took me 3 or 4 minutes of just this to deal with it. And then I could deal with the fact that, okay, I'm not going to fall. I'm good. Fine. Then there's the dum, which is what gives me the willies, right? Because you're just helpless. You're absolutely in the middle of absolute no, like there's nothing you could do. Whereas at least if I'm scuba diving and I'm around a reef, or even if I'm spearfishing, so I've swum with sharks. It's not the sharks that's the issue. I've swum and been surrounded with a bait ball of, 30 hammerheads. That's not the issue. It's being out in the middle of nowhere with 360 degree of infiniteness and just not knowing what's coming at you from what direction and not being able to get you back to it gives me the willies. So at the surf club, there were all these long distance swims and all these ocean swims. And I'm just like, fuck that. No, that's my line. Not doing it. So good luck with that.
Well, I've never done it before. So yeah, thanks for that. So I'll have a freak out while I'm halfway out there.
No, I think more people are killed by cows than sharks. Like it's super, it's right. Super rare. But cool, man.
But in terms of diet, I have a nutritious breakfast. I love, starting the day really well. I do some intermittent fasting, drink plenty of water. I don't feel like I'm really disciplined with diet, but I just enjoy good food. So, but
do you ever get stressed?
Sorry?
Do you ever get stressed?
Oh, yeah, but not, yeah. I used to be a very anxious character. That was a big part of my journey until I kind of explored. I think anxiety always needs a backstory to survive. So that was a big part of my insecurity, feeling like I was in over my head, I was about to get found out, or things weren't going to work. So as I've really, developed my own sense of security and I'm very comfortable as myself, it just doesn't really make sense to be anxious. I feel like I create great safety for myself. So there's not a lot of stress. not to say things always work out or I don't have moments where I'm frustrated or annoyed, but I don't get taken out by stress very often, or I don't have episodes where I'm useless because I'm in deep with stress.
So what's next?
I keep talking about the UN and along the line of, solving this problem at a global level. I think our world leaders are very insecure people, and we suffer greatly because of their leadership is given out of insecurity. So I'm not sure how to speak at that level, but my intention is to make a difference at a global level. So it's trying to play at that level. I also think a lot about retired athletes. I heard Grant Hackett and Michael Phelps interviewed on Tim Ferriss's podcast recently, and I thought it was such a horrible conversation because the way that they both spoke about their mental health after, the intensity of being a peak performance athlete and what's happened post that, I think it was a very inadequate treatment of the subject. And I think athletes are extremely prone to great suffering with insecurity simply because of how rewarded they are for their one thing. And when they can no longer do their one thing, who are they? Like, they just have a massive crisis of identity. So I'm particularly interested in equipping retiring athletes with tools around how to solve their insecurity as they reinvent themselves and come into a new season. Continuing to write, continuing to serve entrepreneurs and ambitious people. That's what's next.
How can someone reach out to you?
Well, quite easy to find thanks to my parents. There's only one Jaemin Frazer that I'm aware of. So if you can work out how to spell it, then you can find me online quite easily. I like Instagram as that's my favorite social platform to hang out. But I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn. Otherwise the book at unhinderedbook.com or the Insecurity Project podcast on Spotify or iTunes or YouTube.
I love it. I want to do one final question. And I don't ask this all the time, but I think you're the guy to ask it to, is if you were a very, very long time from now to be on your deathbed looking back at your life, and if it was upon reflection a beautiful moment, you're surrounded by friends and family and you'd lived a good full life and it was beautiful as opposed to fearful. And if, let's say, a great grandchild, or with the right technologies going, a great grandchild comes to you and kind of pulls you by the hand and says, Grandpa Jaemin, before you go, could you share with me some insights or some wisdom in terms of how I might live a good life as you have? But in that moment, you realize that, wow, this might just be the very last thing you say. What would you say?
Well, who knows if it's what I would actually say then, but if I had to answer that question now, what's most pressing for me is just the thing that when I reflect on my life to this point, the thing I'm most grateful for is that I've found a way not to tie myself to any one story, that all we have is story, and the people who succeed in life, they do tell better stories. They tell more beautiful stories, and they position themselves as a storyteller, not the actor. So when one narrative they've been living out of becomes restrictive, they find a way to jettison it and reinvent it or update it. So it will be along the lines of making sure that they see their ability to update their story when necessary. And that's an element of success and not to be frowned upon. Not everyone celebrates you when you change your story. Like, you've changed is a very common response when someone updates as though it were a bad thing. Not everyone is cheering you on when you evolve and grow. But that's what I would say. Keep finding a way to tell better stories and find yourself in bigger stories. That's how to live a good life.
Beautiful words, mate. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Glen Carlson. I've been speaking with Jaemin Frazer, my good friend, and someone that I absolutely encourage you to spend more time with, whether it's through his radio, his podcast, his books, or working with him directly, mate. I've had an absolute pleasure with the opportunity to work with you, and I'm very much looking forward to floating down a river in a raft with you and a couple of other adventurous lads over Easter. That's going to be good fun. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, as always, be brave, have fun, make a dent in the universe.